The salesman handed me the keys, and for a long moment I just stood there in the parking lot of Carolina Coach Center, holding them in my open palm like they were something fragile. A whole bundle of them. Ignition, storage bays, the auxiliary, the bedroom slide, heavier than I expected. I remember thinking that. How heavy a key ring could be when it represented 38 years of standing on a job site in steel-toed boots, and one funeral, and one quiet decision made over a cup of coffee at 4 in the morning when I couldn't sleep anymore. The motorhome behind me was a Newmar Bay Star, white with bronze accents, 34 feet from bumper to bumper, Class A gas engine, brand new off the lot. $187,462 after tax and registration. I had paid cash. The salesman, a young man named Dale with a tie that didn't quite reach his belt, had asked me 3 times if I wanted to finance, and 3 times I had said no thank you, and the 3rd time he just nodded and stopped asking. "Where are you headed first, Mr. Lockhart?" he said. "Alaska," I told him. "Eventually, I'm going to take my time about it." He smiled the way young men smile at older men who say things like that. Polite, a little patronizing. Like I told him I was going to be an astronaut. I didn't mind. He didn't know I'd been planning it for 2 years. He didn't know I had a binder at home with 111 pages of routes, campgrounds, fuel stops, and a separate map of every national park between Asheville and Anchorage with the elevations marked in pencil. I drove the Bay Star home that afternoon, sitting up high above the road for the first time in my life, and I cried twice on the way. Once on Highway 26, because a country song came on the radio that my wife used to hum while she did the dishes. And once when I pulled into my own driveway and saw the house she and I had bought in 1987 and realized she would never see this rig parked next to the dogwood she planted the year my daughter was born. I parked it carefully. I checked the level. I plugged in the shoreline so the batteries would top off. I walked around it 3 times, running my hand along the fiberglass, and then I went inside the house and made myself a sandwich, which is what my wife would have told me to do. That was a Tuesday. On Wednesday morning, my son-in-law came over with my daughter, and he took my keys. I want to be clear about something before I go any further. I had known for almost 7 months that this was coming. I had not known the day, and I had not known the exact words he would use, but I had known the shape of it, the way you know a thunderstorm is coming when the air goes still and the cattle start lying down. I had been preparing. Quietly. Methodically, the way I used to plan a foundation pour, with every variable accounted for, and a plan B and a plan C in my back pocket. My son-in-law's name doesn't matter much in the telling, but I'll call him by it because he earned it. His name was Quentin. He sold commercial real estate in Charlotte and drove a leased BMW that he could not actually afford. And he had been married to my daughter for 9 years. My daughter's name was Jeanette. She was 36 years old, and she had my wife's eyes, and she had been a smart, kind, funny child. And somewhere between her wedding and her 34th birthday, she had become a person who looked at the floor when her husband talked and laughed half a beat after he laughed and asked permission to buy a new pair of shoes. I had watched it happen. I had not stopped it. That's a thing I will carry with me until I am in the ground, next to her mother. They pulled up in his BMW around 9 in the morning. I was out by the Bay Star with a chamois and a bucket of water, doing nothing useful, just touching it. He got out first. He always got out first. Jeanette got out of the passenger side and stood by the car door with her arms crossed, and she would not look at me. "Dad," Quentin said. He was wearing a polo shirt the color of a Band-Aid. "We need to talk." "Good morning to you too," I said. He looked at the motorhome. He looked at it the way a tax collector looks at a house. "Jesus, Dad, tell me you didn't." "I didn't what?" "Tell me you didn't actually buy this thing." "I bought it on Tuesday," I said. "Drove it home myself. Runs like a top." He made a sound that was not quite a laugh. He turned to Jeanette and held out his hand, and she put something into it without looking up. It took me a second to realize it was a folder. Manila. Brand new. He brought it over to me and held it out, and I did not take it. "Dad," he said, "I need you to listen to me very carefully. We had a conversation about this 6 months ago, about the inheritance, about the plan, about what's responsible for a man your age and your circumstances. I'm 64, I said. You're 64 and your wife is gone and you live alone in a 4-bedroom house and you just spent almost $200,000 on a recreational vehicle that you don't know how to drive. I drove it home. You drove it 12 miles. I'm going to drive it considerably farther than that. He held out the folder again. Dad, we've had this conversation. Jeanette and I have power of attorney concerns. We have concerns about your decision-making capacity. The kids are scared. They saw their grandfather by a bus. They came home crying. This was a lie. I had spoken to my granddaughter on the phone the night before. She was 11. She had asked me if she could come to Yellowstone with me when school let out. I had told her we'd see what her mother said. Quentin, I said, I'd like you to leave. He didn't leave. He took 2 steps closer to me and lowered his voice the way a man does when he wants you to know he's being reasonable. Dad, give me the keys. We're going to the Outer Banks tomorrow, the whole family, and on the way back Sunday we're going to stop at Sunset Manor and you're going to tour the place. Just tour. That's all. Beth in Unit 14. Kathy in Unit 9. You'll like them. They have a movie night. Sunset Manor is in Hickory, I said. That's not on the way back from the Outer Banks. Dad, the keys. I want to tell you that I argued. I want to tell you that I stood up to my full 6 feet and told that man to get off my property and out of my life. I didn't. I looked past him at Jeanette. She was still staring at the asphalt of the driveway. There was a tiny tremor in her chin. I had not seen that tremor since she was 9 years old and had broken a vase her mother loved. I took the key ring out of my pocket. I separated the ignition key from the others. I put it in his hand. That's all of them, I said. He looked. There were 4 other keys on that ring, all of them for the bay storage doors. He took those too. Thank you, he said. I know this is hard. We're doing this because we love you. I did not answer him. He walked over to the bay star and tried the door, which was not locked, and then he climbed up into it and sat in the driver's seat and looked out at me through the big windshield with an expression on his face that I will remember when I am dying. It was not even greed. It was satisfaction. He had won something. Whatever it was, in his head, he had won it. He climbed back down and locked everything and put the keys in his pocket and walked back to the BMW. We'll be back tomorrow morning to pick it up, he said. 7:30. Have a bag packed. Soft-sided. 2 pairs of pants, 4 shirts. You won't need a jacket. Sunset Manor keeps it warm. I did not say anything. They got in the BMW and drove away. Jeanette never looked at me. Not once. I stood in the driveway for about a minute after they were gone. Then I went inside the house and I called Morris Trentham, who was my attorney, and I said, Morris, it's happening tomorrow at 7:30 in the morning. She said, Are you sure you want to go through with this the way we planned? I said, Yes. She said, Then I'll see you at 4 o'clock today and bring the device. I want to back up, because if I tell you what was in the glove box of that motorhome the next morning without telling you how it got there, then you'll think I'm a magician, and I'm not. I'm an old man who knew his son-in-law. 7 months earlier, my wife had been gone for almost 2 years. I was getting through it. I was eating. I was sleeping a little. I had started thinking, quietly, in the back of my mind, about what it would mean to actually live for myself. I had a 401k and a pension from the engineering firm, and the house was paid off, and my wife's life insurance, which she had insisted on against my objections, had paid out a number that surprised me. I was, by most reasonable measures, a comfortable man. I had Thanksgiving at Jeanette and Quentin's house. They lived in a development outside of Charlotte, where all the houses looked like they had been printed by the same machine. After dinner, the children went to play in the basement, and Jeanette went to do the dishes, and I excused myself to use the bathroom on the 2nd floor. The downstairs bathroom was occupied. The hallway upstairs went past Quentin's home office. The door was cracked. I heard him on the phone. He was not speaking quietly because he didn't think anyone was up there. He was speaking to a man whose name I later learned was Burton Halpre, who is a probate attorney with a small practice in Gastonia and a disciplinary record I would later read in some detail. What I heard, standing in the hallway in my socks with my hand on the bathroom door, was this. He said the words, "diminished capacity." He said the words, "no contest if we move now." He said the words, "the house plus the IRA plus whatever's in the brokerage. Call it 1.4. He said, "I just need him to do something dumb. Something we can point at. The minute he buys a sports car or a boat or hell, even gets a girlfriend, we file." I stood there for what felt like a long time. Then I went into the bathroom and I washed my hands and I went back downstairs and I had a piece of pumpkin pie and I told my daughter the dinner was wonderful and I drove home. That was a Thursday in November. By Monday, I had hired Maris Trentham. Maris is 67 years old, gray-haired, no nonsense, and runs a small estate practice out of an office above a hardware store in downtown Asheville. She had handled my wife's estate. She had been at the funeral. When I sat in her office and told her what I had heard, she did not gasp or shake her head or any of that. She took notes on a yellow legal pad with a fountain pen. And when I was done, she said, "All right, we have a few options. Let's talk about which one you want." What we did over the next 7 months was this. First, we built a trust, an irrevocable one with very specific clauses. My house, my retirement accounts, my brokerage, and any major future purchases all went into it. I was the grantor and the lifetime beneficiary. The successor trustee was not Jeanette. It was a corporate trustee at a small bank in Knoxville that Maris had worked with for 30 years. The trust contained a provision that any beneficiary who initiated, supported, or assisted in any legal action to declare me incompetent would be permanently disinherited, a no-contest clause with teeth. Second, I underwent 3 separate cognitive evaluations. One with my regular doctor, one with a geriatric psychiatrist in Asheville, one with a neuropsychologist at Duke. All 3 reports concluded that I was, in their words, of sound mind and exhibiting cognitive function in the upper percentile for my age cohort. Maris had certified copies in her office. She had digital copies in a cloud drive. She had paper copies in a fireproof safe. She had given me, 3 weeks before the day in question, a small thumb drive with all of it on it. Third, and this is the part I want you to understand, we did not just defend, we set the trap. Maris said to me one afternoon in February, "He's going to try something. He's going to need a triggering event. We can wait for him to invent one, or we can give him one and control the conditions." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "I mean that the Bay Star you've been talking about. Buy it. Buy it in your own name, not the trust's. Park it in your driveway. He will come for it. When he does, we will be ready." I said, "Why would I put my own motorhome at risk?" She said, "Because we're not going to let him keep it. We're going to let him take it." The plan, as she laid it out, was elegant. We would not file the trust paperwork transferring the Bay Star into the trust until the moment he physically attempted to remove it from my property. We had everything pre-drafted with our local clerk, a young woman named Patrice, who had grown up 2 doors down from Maris, and would file anything Maris handed her within the hour. The minute Quentin showed up to take the motorhome, Maris would file. By the time he had it on the highway, the title would no longer be in my name. It would be in the trust's name, which meant that when he drove it off, he would not be moving an asset of an alleged incompetent person. He would be moving a vehicle that legally belonged to a trust he had no authority over. That is grand theft auto. That is a felony. We added 2 more layers. The first was a restraining order, which I had filed in March after Quentin had shown up at my house drunk one Saturday and put his finger in my chest and said some things to me about my wife that I will not repeat. He had not contested it. He had thought the restraining order was beneath his notice. It was a temporary order, but Maris had it converted to a permanent one in a hearing he did not attend in May. A permanent civil restraining order prohibiting him from any contact with me or any of my property without prior written consent. The second layer was the cameras. 3 of them, 2 interior, 1 exterior. All of them part of the factory security package on the Bay Star. All of them recording to a cloud server I had set up myself. with help from a young man at Best Buy who showed me what to click. The cameras had been recording from the moment I drove the rig off the lot. They had recorded Quentin climbing into the driver's seat on Wednesday morning and looking out at me through the windshield with that expression on his face. They were going to record everything else. So when Morris told me that Wednesday afternoon to bring the device, I knew what she meant. I drove to her office at 4. I gave her the thumb drive with the cognitive evaluations, even though she already had her copies because that was the protocol. She gave me a sealed envelope and a folder. The folder contained the trust documents, fully executed but not yet filed with the state, transferring title of the Baystar into the trust. The sealed envelope contained printed copies of 3 things. 1. A notarized statement from the trustee bank in Knoxville confirming the asset transfer, dated the next morning. 2. A printed copy of the permanent restraining order. 3. A 1-page note that I had handwritten myself the night before and given to Morris, who had photocopied it. The note said this: "You thought my silence meant I had given up. I have not. I have been waiting. Look around you. Every word you have said in this vehicle since yesterday morning has been recorded. The local sheriff has a copy. The vehicle you are driving is no longer mine. As of 7:45 this morning, it belongs to the Lockhart Family Trust, of which you are not a beneficiary and never will be. You are currently in possession of a stolen vehicle in violation of a permanent restraining order. Pull over. Sit still. The deputies are already on the way. I love my daughter. I love my grandchildren. I do not love you, and I never have." Maris put the folder and the envelope into a small zipped pouch with a magnetic catch. I drove home. That night after dark, I went out to the Baystar and I unlocked the passenger door with a spare key. Quentin did not know existed, and I placed the pouch in the glove box, and I closed the glove box, and I locked the rig back up. I went back inside and I made myself a sandwich, because that is what my wife would have told me to do. And I waited. Quentin arrived at 7:28 the next morning. He was alone. Jeanette was in the BMW behind him with the kids. My grandchildren, the 11-year-old and the 8-year-old, both of them in the back seat looking at their tablets. I knew the moment I saw them in the car that I would have to be very careful, because whatever happened in the next hour was going to happen in front of those 2 children, and they were going to remember it for the rest of their lives. Quentin got out. He had a gym bag with him. "Bag packed," he said. "It's by the door," I said. There was no bag by the door. I was not getting in that vehicle. He nodded and walked past me to the Baystar. He used the keys. He climbed in the driver's side. He used the keys. He climbed in the driver's side. He started the engine. The big diesel-style gas V10 turned over smooth and clean. He sat there for a minute, adjusting the seat, adjusting the mirrors, looking at the dash. Then he honked twice and waved at Jeanette in the BMW. I walked over to the driver's side window and I rapped on the glass. He rolled it down halfway. "What?" he said. "You should check the glove compartment before you go," I said. He looked at me like I told him there was a snake in there. "What? There's something in there for you? I want you to read it before you drive away." "Dad, I don't have time for whatever this is. We need to be on the road. Sunset Manor expects us at 1. Read it before you pull out of the driveway, Quentin, please. As one favor. The last thing I will ever ask you for." He stared at me. Then he leaned over and popped the glove box. The pouch fell out into his hand. He unzipped it. He took out the folder first. I watched his face change. He read the trust document. He read the trustee statement. He read the restraining order, although he had seen it before. He picked up my handwritten note last. He read it twice. The second time, his lips moved. He looked up at me. "What is this?" "It's exactly what it looks like," I said. This isn't real. You can't just transfer a vehicle title overnight. Morris filed the paperwork at 7:45 this morning. The trust owns the Baystar. You are sitting in a vehicle that does not belong to me and does not belong to you. You are in violation of the restraining order. The cameras have been recording since Tuesday afternoon. The sheriff's office has a copy of every minute. He was breathing through his mouth. Dad, listen. We can talk about this. Get out of the vehicle and let's go inside and talk about this. I'm not getting in that vehicle, Quentin, and you should get out of it. Right now. Before they get here. The first cruiser turned into the driveway about 30 seconds later. Then a second one, Deputy Marland Pace, who I had played in the charity golf tournament with the previous October, got out of the lead vehicle. He had a printout in his hand. He was not smiling. "Mr. Lockhart," he said to me. He nodded. "Deputy," I said. He walked over to the driver's side window of the Bay Star. Quentin was still sitting there with the folder in his lap. The engine was still running. "Sir," Deputy Pace said, "I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle, slowly. Hands where I can see them." Quentin looked past him at me. His face was the color of skim milk. Dad, please." I did not say anything. He got out. The deputy patted him down. The second deputy was talking to Jeanette in the BMW. The kids were watching out the back window with their tablets in their laps. My granddaughter, the 11-year-old, was crying. I walked over to the BMW. I tapped on the back window, very gently. My granddaughter looked up. I crooked my finger at her. She looked at her mother. Jeanette nodded. The girl got out. I knelt down. My knees do not kneel as well as they used to, but I knelt. I said, "Listen to me. What's happening right now is not your fault, and it is not your mother's fault, and you have not done anything wrong. Your father has been doing some things that are against the law, and the police are going to take him to talk about them. I want you to know that I love you. I want you to know that your grandmother loved you. I want you to know that you are still going to come with me to Yellowstone in June, if your mother says it is all right. Do you understand me?" She nodded. She was crying too hard to speak. "Good girl," I said. "Now go sit with your brother." Deputy Pace put Quentin in the back of the cruiser. He did not put cuffs on him in front of the children, which I appreciated. Jeanette stood in the driveway with her arms wrapped around herself like she was cold, even though it was already 72 degrees that morning. She was looking at me, not at the floor, not at the asphalt, at me. I walked over to her. She said, You knew this whole time." "I knew since Thanksgiving," I said. She said, "Why didn't you tell me?" I said, "Because you would have told him, not on purpose. You would have, because that is what he has trained you to do for 9 years, and I needed him to walk into this on his own legs." She started crying. Not the polite crying, the other kind. The kind I had not seen since she was a child. She put her face in her hands, and she folded forward, and I caught her under the elbows the way I had caught her when she was learning to walk. She said into her hands, "What do I do now?" I said, "You don't have to decide right now. You don't have to decide right now. You don't have to decide today. I am not going to tell you what to do about your marriage. I am your father, and I am not going to be the man who tells you to leave your husband. But I'm going to tell you this. Open your eyes. Open your eyes the rest of the way. And whatever you decide to do, when you decide it, I will be here. I will be in the motorhome, and you will be able to call me, and I will turn around and come home. Do you understand?" She nodded into her hands. I drove the Bay Star out of my own driveway at 11:30 that morning, after the deputies had gone, after Jeanette had taken the children home, after Morris had come over and we had sat at my kitchen table and gone through the paperwork one more time. Quentin was charged that afternoon with felony grand theft of a motor vehicle, violation of a permanent restraining order, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The fraud charge came from the recordings, which included a phone call he had made on Wednesday evening from his car to Burton Halpry, the probate attorney, in which he had described what he was about to do. That call had been picked up by the cabin microphones because he had been sitting in the Bay Star at the time, fiddling with the captain's chair, getting comfortable in what he thought was about to be his. I drove west. I went through the Smokies first, because they were closest. I parked at a campground outside Townsend, and I sat in the Bay Star that night with the door open and the crickets going. And I made myself a sandwich, because that is what my wife would have told me to do. I want to tell you what I have learned, because I think it is the only thing worth telling. A man my age, a man whose wife has died, is supposed to be quiet. He is supposed to be small. He is supposed to take up less space than he used to. He is supposed to be grateful when his children visit, and ashamed when they don't, and obedient when they tell him what is best for him. That is the script. I knew it before any of this happened. Everyone my age knows it. What I have learned is that a quiet old man and a defeated old man are not the same thing, and the people who confuse the two are usually the ones who end up in the back of a cruiser. I did not raise my voice once during any of what I have just told you. I did not curse. I did not threaten. I made a sandwich and I called my lawyer and I waited 7 months. Patience is not weakness. Silence is not surrender. Sometimes silence is the sound of a man loading a rifle slowly in the dark while you stand in his kitchen telling him what he is going to do tomorrow. Jeanette filed for divorce 4 months later. She did it on her own, without me telling her to, without me even knowing she was thinking about it. She and the children moved into a smaller house in a different school district. My granddaughter came with me to Yellowstone in June. My grandson came too. We saw a bear from a safe distance in Old Faithful and the Grand Prismatic Spring, and we drove home through Montana and Wyoming and Nebraska, and the Bay Star handled every mile of it like it had been built for exactly that purpose. Quentin served 11 months. He is not in our lives anymore. I do not know where he is, and I do not care. I am writing this from a campground outside Whitehorse, Yukon Territory. Tomorrow I cross into Alaska. I am 65 years old now. My wife has been gone 3 years. My granddaughter is 12. My driveway is empty back home except for the dogwood her grandmother planted, which is blooming this week, I am told. I am not done yet. Not by a long way. I have been parked outside Whitehorse for 2 days now, watching the long northern light do strange things to the spruce trees, and I have had time to think about what any of this means. I am not a philosopher. I poured concrete for a living. But a man gets to a certain age, and he starts to notice that nothing happens by accident, and that the things people do to you are usually the things you have, in some quiet way, allowed. Quentin did not become what he became overnight. He became it slowly, over 9 years, in 1,000 small moments where someone could have said no to him and didn't. I was one of those someones. I watched my daughter shrink, and I told myself it was not my place. I watched him speak over her at dinner, and I told myself she was a grown woman. I watched her stop laughing the way she used to, and I told myself I was being sentimental. The cause was my silence. The effect was a man who walked into my driveway and put his hand out for my keys and expected me to give them to him. He had been given things by quiet people his whole life. He had every reason to believe I would be one more. What I learned, sitting in Maurice Trentham's office that first afternoon back in November, is that there are 3 things a man has to keep sharp if he wants to live with any dignity in this world. The first is his sense of right and wrong, and I do not mean the polite kind. I mean the kind that wakes you up at 4 in the morning and tells you that what you heard through a cracked office door is not something you get to forget. The second is his mind, which is a tool like any other tool, and which rusts the minute you stop using it. I planned that motorhome heist against me the way I used to plan a foundation pour. I drew it on graph paper. I checked it twice. The third is the will to actually do the thing, even when doing it costs you something. It cost me my daughter's marriage. It cost me a Thanksgiving dinner I will never get back. It was worth every penny. If you take anything from what I have told you, take this. Do not confuse being kind with being soft. Do not confuse being old with being done. Quentin looked at me on Wednesday morning, and he saw a 64-year-old widower in a flannel shirt holding a chamois, and he thought he was looking at someone he could move around like a piece of furniture. He was not wrong about the flannel shirt. He was wrong about everything else. Jeanette is sleeping better now. My grandchildren laugh at the dinner table. The dogwood is blooming. I am driving to Alaska in the morning, and I am not done yet, and neither are you.